Romans chapter 6 in verses 5 through 13. So kind of a long set through there. Probably take this, from about verse 5 to 9. It says here in Romans chapter 6, verse 5 through 9, it says, "For if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection, knowing this, that our old man is crucified with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. For he that is dead is freed from sin. Now if we be dead with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Christ being raised from the dead dieth no more, death hath no more dominion over him." Brother David, would you pray for us here this morning?
Yes, thank you, Lord, for this day that we've all been in attendance. I pray for those that's not with us, that's on traveling and doing their things. Just be with those in prayer that have illness and that we ask to pray for. Just be with this message and later on be with the service and follow all these things. That's in Jesus' name.
Amen. Now, it's been said before that if you could just live just a few verses that you read right there, if you could just live those verses right there, you could pick out after you got saved verses that you wanted to live by. I'd pick out those verses right there, because if you could live those, you'd live a sinless life. If you could just reckon yourself as dead to sin and alive to Jesus Christ, that'd fix 99.99% of your problems.
Amen.
But before you're saved, you are so attached to your body that the Old Testament often equates the soul with the body. I think this is some of the stuff that we got into last week, talking about the soul, if the soul touch any unclean thing, meaning that, you don't obviously touch anything with your soul, you touch it with your body. And the reason he says that is because your soul is attached to your body, so that anything that your body touches before you're saved, your soul also touches. So if the body gets dirty, the soul gets dirty, and that's been cut away at salvation. All right, New Testament salvation cuts it away, and you get into spiritual circumcision. Let's look at a couple places that talk about what we just mentioned there between the soul and the body being attached. You'll see in the next slide a list of verses here that we're going to look at, starting in Genesis chapter 12, verse 5. In fact, a lot of these are going to be back in your Old Testament because there was no final separation on this side of eternity between the soul and the body. That's the reason why when somebody in the Old Testament died, they either went to hell or they went to Abraham's bosom. They couldn't get to heaven because this thing still had to go down. And that's where you find paradise being in the heart of the earth before Jesus Christ. It still had to go down. Genesis chapter 12, verse 5. Genesis 12:5 says, "And Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came." So it refers to the soul, same as the flesh, and could have said 12 or however many bodies, but they referred to them as souls. Let's see. There is a version of Amazing Grace I heard one time. Kind of ticked me off a little bit because they changed one word in it. You know how in Amazing Grace it says, "saved a wretch like me." In this version of the song, updated version of it, changed wretch to soul. Saved a soul like me. No, I was a wretch. That's what the Lord saved, was a wretch. Now he saved my soul, true, but say what you are. Somebody that's wants to flower it up a little bit. Genesis chapter 46, verse 26. Genesis 46:26, "All the souls that came with Jacob into Egypt, which came out of his loins, besides Jacob's sons' wives, all the souls were 66. Okay, the body and the soul they're attached, so they're the same. They're almost indistinguishable from each other. In fact, you see that same thing, that your soul is your bodily shape. Your soul has a bodily shape to it, which is why in the New Testament, when Paul is taken up to the third heaven, he says, whether in the body or out of the body, I cannot tell. Such a one caught up to the third heaven, because his soul had the same bodily shape that he had. You see that same thing being attributed to the rich man that goes to hell. He can see, he can taste, he can touch, he can remember, because in hell he lifted up his eyes, meaning that his soul in hell had the same bodily shape. Now, if you want to see a practical, what I would assume on this side of eternity application of that, you'll hear of somebody who's lost a limb, lost an arm, lost a leg. They'll talk about their hand still itches or their foot still itches. They call it phantom limb syndrome. What's the problem? That the soul still has the bodily shape that the flesh has lost. Isn't that interesting? that what they're missing a part of the flesh that the soul still has. All right, let's go on to the book of Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 18. Leviticus 18:29. For whosoever shall commit any of these abominations, even the souls that commit them shall be cut off from among their people. Now, those are things that are committed in the flesh, but he says that the soul commits them. So before salvation, anything that your flesh committed, your soul got on it. There's a little children's song that's sung. It says, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, little mouth, what you say. Be careful, little hands, what you do. Be careful, little feet, where you go. Why? Because, listen, before salvation, everything that you did with your hands, saw with your eyes, spoke with your mouth, all that dirty, filthy stuff, all that was on your soul. You had a filthy soul. All right, look at Leviticus chapter 20, verse 25. It says, ye shall therefore put difference between clean beasts and between unclean fowls and clean, and ye shall not make your souls abominable by beast or by fowl or by manner of living thing that creepeth on the ground, which have separated from you as unclean. Another one would be Joshua chapter 10, verse 28. Says, in that day Joshua took Makkedah and smote it with the edge of the sword, and the king thereof he utterly destroyed them and all the souls that were therein. He let none remain, and he did to the king of Makkedah as he did unto the king of Jericho. You say, well, that's just a manner of speech. No, he's talking literally. Those things are being attributed to the soul. After salvation, the Holy Spirit cuts away the soul and the spirit from the flesh. It's an operation made without hands. Paul makes it clear that there is nothing good in the flesh in Romans chapter 7, verse 17, which is one that we've looked at before. Behold, in my flesh dwelleth what? No good thing. So after salvation, you are not your body. Now, before salvation, because the soul and the flesh are attached, your body and your soul are one. They're attached. They're sewn together. They're together. It may be a poor illustration, but to me it's somewhat akin to if you ever watched the cartoon Peter Pan. Anybody remember that old cartoon? It shows up in the kid's bedroom and he's got a problem because his shadow has become unattached from his body. He's got the exact wrong problem. He's trying to get the thing sewn back together. But what does his shadow have? His shadow has his bodily shape. It's the exact same shape as his body. Now he's trying to sew the thing back together. We're trying to cut the thing apart. We want the thing to be separate. And what you notice that's interesting in that cartoon is that, Peter Pan's flying around the room and doing stuff, but his shadow's doing something different. Right? His shadow's making fun of him or whatever. Well, when your soul got cut away from your body, there should be an unattachment. The thing should be separated. So the flesh is concerned with satisfying its senses. Smell, taste, touch, sight, sound. But the fact of the matter is that the flesh is insatiable. You cannot satisfy the flesh. It never says, that's enough. It's amazing to me that of how far the flesh will go and how much you can give the flesh without it saying stop. You know, I just think of appetite for one. You know, you go to a place where the food is really good. You know what you'll do just to keep satisfying the tongue? I mean, you will engorge yourself. I mean, to the point of being sick. To what? To satisfy the tongue. Just, you know, it just wants a taste. Oh, that's good. Boy, I keep on feeding that thing. I have a hard time at some of our fellowship meals. You know, it's a good thing that there's a limit on, you know, how much some of those platters can hold, because I get up there and, oh, thank goodness it's empty, because I'd have gotten a third helping. I'm glad you all ate the rest of that, because I just go on eating. I've made fun of myself before, is that older I get, I guess as the stomach expands, see that kind of a dirty, rotten thing the stomach does, is it expands to receive more and more. And there's people that have surgeries to sew that thing back up to keep it from being able to take in as much, because over time you train your body to satisfy itself more and more and more and more. And to get to the point where, well, you know, it's customary to have seconds, you know, and then, well, I've still got some room in there, and, you know, I want my wife to know how much I really like her and enjoy her food, so I'm going to go ahead and get thirds, and, well, there's really not that much left. You know, it's really not worth, you know, dirtying up another dish to, you know, you take it out of the pan to put it in a Tupperware container. That's what I call it, you know, first, second, thirds, and then might as well finish it off. Because I'm going to stop finishing things off. That's my problem. It's the flesh. Now, you could say that about the tongue, but it's true of every other sense that you have. You hear about people, you know, stay up all night, you know, just another episode, let's just go ahead and finish off the season. Oh, well, you know, I mean, we're so many seasons in, we might as well finish off the series. And before you know it, you've been up till 2 o'clock in the morning, some of you kids with video games. Well, I just need to finish that level, just need to finish that boss fight, you know, and then you look up, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Listen, I know it's true. I've seen the kids struggle in school, and they're falling asleep in the middle of things, and granted, they probably fall asleep anyway in my math class, but, you know, I've had kids, I was like, okay, just stand up. You know, you're probably not going to fall asleep standing up, and if you do, we'll all enjoy watching it. But I've talked to some of those kids. What's the deal? We pull them over after class. When did you go to bed last night? Oh, 3 o'clock in the morning. What were you doing? Oh, I was playing Fortnite. You know, I was playing a video game. I was like, it's an awfully stupid thing to do. You knew you had a test today. Wish you'd spend as much time studying for that test as you study maps and strategies and watch. You know, it's so bad anymore that kids don't even play the video games. They sit up all night and watch other people play the video games. Isn't that the epitome of laziness? Well, one of these days we're going to look back and, you know, we're going to be on, well, you play the video game. Get in there and actually play the video game. You lazy bum, sitting in there watching people play video games. Real people going to work. It's amazing to me how the standard and what the things preached against have become over the years. It used to be back in Billy Sunday's day, and that generation that they'd preach against people wasting time playing cards. Well, now, you know, we wish to God that people were doing something as clean as playing cards. Go play cards, you know, go play, you know, pitch or pinochle or something, you know, get to, you know, go look at your kids, play a game of Monopoly, you know, get upset, throw the board or whatever. You know, I used to get upset over people just wasting their time playing games. Like, would to God people played some clean games. It's amazing how things have changed. But that's the kind of stuff that your flesh does. It's not satisfied with what it sees. It needs to see more. It's not satisfied with what it hears. It needs to hear more. You know, oh, I like that music. And then you get into more and more types of music. And, you know, you get to where you can handle what it is that you hear. You know, a little bit of cussing here, you know, that type of thing. That doesn't bother you anymore. You know, I mean, watching a homosexual couple, you know, in a television show, that doesn't really arouse your ire anymore. You go ahead and watch it. You know, what your eyes will, you know, what your eyes will take, what your ears will take, what your mouth will take, what you can handle. The flesh is insatiable. You cannot satisfy it. It's never had enough. You take a day off to maybe fast. I guarantee you it won't be satisfied. You know, you won't be able to go probably 2 days, 3 days. It'll need to eat. So listen, we've been eating for 35 years. Don't you think you could go a day without food? No, I don't think I can. Can't you be satisfied? No. How about sleep? Maybe some of you are better at that than others. Having 3 kids in the house, there's not enough sleep. You can't get enough. You ever had that feeling, I slept too much? You're more tired when you wake up than before you went to bed. Got too much sleep. But while you're laying in bed, you think, oh, just 5 more minutes. I think one of the most wicked things people ever designed was a snooze button. You didn't need a snooze button. It's funny to me, some of the things that different clock companies and things have designed to encourage people to wake up. You've got anymore, I think there's some alarm clocks that come with an equation that you have to answer, or questions that you have to answer before the alarm will turn itself off. There's people that take their phone and set the alarm and then go and they throw it across the room. So in order to turn that alarm, they're going to have to get up out of bed to go find it, and it's under a dresser somewhere. You know why that is? Because your flesh isn't satisfied. It's never had enough. And you go on down through all the different things that the flesh desires, and it's never enough. It just wants more and more. The Japanese have a profound proverb. It says, man take drink, drink take drink, drink take man. Man takes a drink, drink takes another drink. Before you know it, the drink owns the man. That's the way the flesh goes. You look at things and what your flesh desires, and are you really in control of your flesh, or is your flesh in control of you? How much of your day is controlled by finding what it is that your flesh desires to go and give it to it? All right? I talked about this probably a week ago. You get in the midst of something that you really enjoy, and then all of a sudden you have to stop to go find food. Right? You get in the middle of a project or work or whatever, and like, oh, I cannot work anymore. I've had times where I had to work late over at the school, and man, I've got this huge project. It's, I've got data that I got to collect for the administrators or whatever, and before I know it, I look up, it's 5 o'clock, stomach's grumbling. Man, if I could just work, a couple more hours. I really don't have time to stop, but I'll have to go, get in a truck, drive down to Casey's, go get food, come back with that food, sit there, and by the end of it, I probably spent an hour trying to take care of the flesh. And then you got to take care of all the other things that go along with all of that. That's the way the flesh goes. It's got to stop and be satisfied. Now, some of you are maybe better with putting it off than others. A fornicator gets to the point where he lives for that desire. You wonder some of the darker things that have been done, things that are near unmentionable, especially in a church setting. And how did that stuff come to be? How did people go to commit such terrible acts against other people? A person's not necessarily born that way. You look at an innocent little baby. You look at, I think, is the youngest person in our church right now, Enoch? You know what he is right now? He's innocent. I mean, it doesn't mean he doesn't make a mess, and, it doesn't mean he hasn't figured out how to manipulate, but for the most part, he's innocent. You look at a teeny tiny little baby. You know what? If that child doesn't learn how to control his flesh at a certain point, he is capable of any of the most wicked acts that anybody's ever committed. Yeah. And so are you, if you don't learn how to control the thing. If you don't learn how to control your impulses, that's how people become murderers and all kinds of terrible things, some of the most wicked stuff that you've ever heard of. Starts off with something, looking at, for a young man, looking at the wrong kind of images, spending too much time looking at the wrong kinds of pictures. And then it doesn't satisfy him like it used to satisfy him. So he gets into more prolific, more lascivious images to satisfy the same desire of the flesh. And before you know it, then he's got to act on it. And it gets darker and darker and darker and darker and darker until you wind up in some of the most unbelievably wicked stuff that you couldn't even imagine. How did that happen? He indulged in it, to the point where he didn't get the same kick out of it that he used to, and so he had to take it further and further and further and further. And you find, not all of them get caught. They don't really show them like they used to. I think the last time I was at Walmart, you don't really see on the board like you used to the pictures of missing children. You don't really hear about the missing kids. Do you think they've stopped with the missing kids? What do you think a lot of the child trafficking is for? It's people that have dark impulses. And that's stuff that you don't want to dwell on. But boy, you want to have your day ruined? Think about this for a second. You're sitting here, you're safe and comfortable. Right now there's some kid locked in probably the trunk of a car, screaming. Nobody knows where he or she is. Nobody can get to him. Kid went missing, nabbed, gone, no trace of him. And what happens next to them is even worse. And they'll never be heard from again. That'll ruin your day. And there's countless numbers of them. Boy, that'll make you a helicopter parent. Just that kind of thought. And what is the root of all that? A flesh that's insatiable. I wouldn't have to worry about my kids in certain environments if there wasn't a problem with the flesh. Somebody else's flesh. See, I know me, but I don't know you. I know me, but I don't know everybody that's at Walmart. You don't know what kind of predators there are in that place. Pick up your kid, run off with them. You can't find them. I try not to dwell on those types of things. But anymore, when you look at the worst stuff that there is in the world, so what's the solution to that? Well, we need stricter laws and we need stricter enforcement. No, you know what the world needs? The world needs Jesus Christ in this book. Because Jesus Christ in this book is the only stopgap against sin. And sin is the problem. The flesh is the problem. And the harder thing to understanding that is understanding that you still have that flesh even since you got saved. And you have to understand that this is no good thing. There's not one single good thing in this thing. And if you don't figure out how to tell this thing no, you'll have every bit a struggle in your Christian life that you ever had in your lost life. You have to figure out how to tell this thing no. I think that's some of the best preaching I ever heard. I think it was from Brother Stevens. It was about no. No is a good word if you're telling no to the right thing. You need to figure out how to tell yourself no. If you can't figure out how to tell yourself no, listen, you are what we would call a weaker brother or a weaker sister. And listen, there's a lot of weak brethren. And that's not an insult. That just means you're not grown and you haven't made a habit out of telling yourself no. Even make a practice of telling yourself no. We try to make a good practice out of telling our kids no. Our kids are under the impression that every time we leave the house to go somewhere that means they're going to get a toy. No, that's not the rule. You're not getting a toy just because we left the house to go someplace. We went out the other day and we had to go pick some stuff up, and we'd eaten at the Mexican restaurant about 150 times. It was more than I could take. I like the Mexican restaurant, but our kids enjoy going there. You know why? Because they have the little machines where you put in 50 cents and out pops a toy. That's the only reason I think Ezra likes Mexican food. We go into a Mexican restaurant, get a toy. He was upset that we went to Colton's. So he didn't have the little thing with the pop out and the little toy, and he can get to satisfy his flesh. That's an amazing thing. You want to understand something about the flesh, watch the little kids. Just watch them. Because they have no stopgap against the flesh. I want this, I want that. Why? Listen, you can take a kid every day. You take Ezra every day to Dollar General and buy him a new toy. And you know how long he'll play with that thing? 20 minutes. And then it's in a box with all the other things that he's got. But it won't stop him from every time he goes to Dollar General from wanting that new toy. It's got to be new, it's got to be new, it's got to be new. And it satisfies him for just a little bit of time. In fact, it satisfies him less and less and less with every new toy he gets. So we end up, you go into your room, we tell him, you go into your room, you come out with a trash bag full of toys you don't play anymore, then we'll get you a new toy. Well, we got rid of a bunch of stuff that way. But those kids are never satisfied with what they have. And listen, I love Ezra. I just know this. I know that my kid's probably the same as every other kid that's out there. And he's the very picture at that age of your flesh. But you're more mature now, and you're not as vocal about it. The problem is, I think one of the hardest things about becoming an adult and getting a job is now you have the money, and you get to decide what you spend it on, and there's not necessarily somebody there, like a mom or dad, to say, no. You have to learn how to tell yourself, no. And that's harder than having somebody else tell you no. That takes a lot more discipline, is to tell yourself no. Because I don't want to tell myself no. You know what you'll do? You'll do the same thing I do. You justify, man, I've worked all week or all month, and I've got this check, and you know what? I've worked really hard, and I don't drink, and I don't smoke, and I don't do this or that. You know what? I want to treat myself. You know who's talking? The flesh. You know what the flesh needs to hear? No. You don't need that. And kids need to learn those things, and you need to learn those things. But you talk about this stuff. How do people wind up in some of the worst people you've ever heard of, your Ted Bundys and your Charles Mansons and all those types of things? The normal things no longer excited them. And so they go a little bit further into deviation. When that no longer satisfies, they go into perversion. And when that ceases to provide the thrill that they seek, they get into masochism, self-mutilation, sadism, hurting someone else. And after that, there's nowhere else that they won't go. They'll go into this, things that are unimaginable. You take a guy like Dean Coral, a man down in Houston. You would surely think that by the time that the fellow had tortured and abused and violated 10 boys, that would be enough. The final count was 27, and officials probably never did find all the bodies. Talk about somebody by John Wayne Gacy. You know, kids under the floorboards, living with his mom. You think his mom didn't know about it? If they'd let that guy live, I wouldn't doubt that the count would have been 150. You can't fix the flesh. If you continue to give the flesh what it wants, you'll become a monster. Yeah. If you give your kids everything that they want, you'll raise monsters. That's a hard thing, because I don't like telling my kids no, because they're persistent. You know the reason you don't like telling your flesh no? Because your flesh is persistent. It just keeps yapping. Yap, 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 yap. You know, I'm often kind of confused as to how certain people live in the abject poverty that they live in. Boy, if you just get a job and just live within your means, you know, you should be able to afford some things over a period of time. You know, you could work flipping burgers or Dollar General or wherever it is. If you just live within your means, you can eventually have what you need and, upgrade on some things. Just materialistically thinking. You know why people live in abject poverty? Because they can't tell themselves no. And they'll be down, and they'll, because they want more and they want it easy and they want it quick, they'll spend everything that they've got on lotto tickets and scratchers and all that kind of stuff. They can't tell their flesh no. And so you look at the amount of money that they spend coming out of Casey's with Miller Lite and everything else, and they can't tell their flesh no. How much money they spend every week and every month on Marlboro and whatever else the cigarettes are, they can't tell the flesh no. And so they spend their money satisfying the flesh on things that continually say give, 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 and before you look up, you've got nothing. Nothing. It's gone. You can't fix the flesh. The only way to control that flesh is to nail it to the cross and leave it there. So don't work under the assumption, oh, he's talking about disciplining the flesh. You can't discipline the flesh. Now, a lost person can maybe discipline it enough to say, hey, I'm not going to drink and I'm not going to smoke and I'm not going to waste my money here, or there so that I can afford things later on down the road. But listen, when we're talking about spiritual things, even doing that, eventually the flesh will get what it wants. When Jesus Christ says, he says this in Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, he says, take up his cross and follow me. That cross has nothing to do with some burden that God has put on you. I read this a while back. I don't know how many of you know who Peter Cartwright was. Peter Cartwright was a circuit riding Methodist preacher back in the days when Kentucky was a territory. And he tells this story. Of course, he went into this one church, rode in there, and he preached about laying all your burdens on Jesus. It was bearing your burdens, and bearing one another's burdens. And in that church setting, there was a lost German couple, small, slight man and a really heavy-set wife, and was sure that they were lost, and preached. Well, it finally leaves, and German couple headed out the door, and he stayed behind to kind of talk to some of the folks and fellowship a little bit. And of course, back in the days, and he would ride on to the next church on his horse. As he's heading down the road, he can see off in the distance, he can see somebody carrying somebody. It's like, oh, somebody must have gotten injured. And so he rode on up ahead, and what he saw was that little German man carrying his large German wife. And he said, is she okay? He said, oh, yes. And in a heavy German accent, I won't try to duplicate, he said, you were preaching on bearing your burdens. He said, I just want you to know, Pastor, that this wife the Lord gave me, she's the greatest burden the Lord ever gave me. He said, bearing his burden. And he said, put her down, and he explained the gospel to him, and they both knelt and received Christ. It's not the kind of burden we're talking about. But you'll hear that kind of thing down in the South all the time. Some dear Christian women married to some lost man will say, well, my unsaved husband is the cross I have to bear. No, he isn't. That's not what we're talking about. The cross is an instrument of execution. That's what the cross was. It wasn't a burden. It was a form of execution. It was where something was to die. You were to put it in layman's terms today, take up your electric chair and follow me. Well, the electric chair isn't something that you're supposed to carry with you. The electric chair is something that you're supposed to sit in and die in. It'd be like saying, take up your guillotine. Its purpose is to put somebody to death. Now, what did Christ mean when he commanded his disciples to take up the cross? Go back over here to Matthew chapter 16, verse 24. Matthew 16:24. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Okay? This time, we're looking at the whole thing. Let him deny himself. When you nail the flesh to the cross, spiritually, you deny its sinful desires. Now, we've got into this before when looking at the body, soul, and spirit. How do you deny sinful desire? You can't do it by disciplining the flesh and saying, okay, well, I'm just going to tell the flesh no, and that'll do it. No, because the flesh never stops. You see, the flesh never stops. You can't discipline the flesh by continuing to just tell it no. In fact, the best way to tell it no is to say yes to something else. You have to say yes to Christ. You have to deny the flesh by giving to Christ. Because otherwise what you create is a vacuum. That's like saying, I'm just going to deny everything from the flesh. Well, listen, you've got 24 hours in a day. If you just continue to deny the flesh, Well, I'm not going to let the flesh watch TV. I'm not going to let the flesh smoke or drink, and I'm going to limit what it eats. You're going to go to work, I understand that, but what else are you going to do? You're just going to sit in a chair and stare at the wall? Guess what will happen? Listen, you deny your flesh watching TV. Man, the flesh is a clever critter. You know what it'll do? It'll entertain itself in here. And it'll go to some wicked place in here. It'll find some way to get what it wants. So you know what you do? You can't deny the flesh by simply taking away from the flesh the things that it desires. You have to feed it right things. You have to feed it that which is right. Okay? So maybe your problem is music. Your flesh desires something to listen to. Well, then give it something to listen to. Okay? Just give it the right things to listen to. Man, I've got, let's say that was your problem for a second. I tell you what, I can help you out with that. I've got oodles and oodles of hours of good Christian music. I got stuff from the Garner family. You can get some good stuff. I'm not saying all their stuff is good stuff, but Daly and Vincent's got some good stuff. Listen, I've got blowout specials that are in pretty good shape. There's some good stuff that you can listen to that will feed your spirit. You can say, in order to say no to your flesh, you have to say yes to that which is right. And that'll be the only stopgap to it, is to feed yourself the right things. Add to that, don't just make it all music, throw in some preaching in there. You put the thing on shuffle and you listen to 5 or 6 songs and then listen to a sermon. And you just keep feeding yourself the right things and the right things and the right things and the right things. And little by little, what you're doing is you're starving the flesh. But if all you ever do is starve the flesh, all you'll think about is how hungry you are. And then when you finally give up, you'll consume twice as much as what you would have. But if you're feeding yourself the right things, you're feeding yourself spiritual things, then the call and the hunger of the flesh will become a still small voice over time. But the problem is that it's never just one thing. It's never just music. It'll be the things that you watch. Okay, you need to find a way to watch and feed your eyes the right things. And I guarantee you that 90% of this is not the right things. And I'm not saying that everything on there is bad, but you better find out, what you can handle and what you can't handle. Right? You can find on that YouTube, you can find the very most wicked stuff there ever was. There's also some good stuff you can find Brother Peacock's sermons on there. That's the stuff I enjoy. I don't even need to watch it. I'll put that thing face down in the seat next to me and get it connected up with the speakers in my car, and I'll listen to a sermon to and from work. Listen to a Bible study to and from work, and then sit and watch it whenever I can watch it. But it goes back to that principle that John the Baptist talked about. He must increase and I must decrease. Well, the only way for me to decrease is for him to increase. The only way to battle the flesh is to feed the spirit. You cannot just starve one. If you just starve one, whenever it finally comes back around, it'll be 10 times worse than it was before. You can just say, well, I'm just going to discipline the flesh. People do that all the time, and they're not even saved people. Okay? Let's see. So when you got to nail the flesh to the cross spiritually, but not just put your flesh on the cross. You have to put Christ on the throne. Paul said this in 1 Corinthians 9:27, I keep under my body and bring it into subjection. But don't just read that in a vacuum and just say, well, I'm going to succeed just by putting my flesh on the cross and bringing my body into subjection. You have to elevate Christ at the same time you're subjecting the flesh. At the same time. If not first, elevate Jesus Christ, and by proxy, the flesh is crucified. The flesh is like a little child. I want this, I want that, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm cold, I want a drink of water. Are we there yet? And what you want to say is just shut up. Just shut up. I'm not trying to be mean to my kids or anything like that, but listen, there's something about, a 4-year-old. My goodness, they will push those buttons. If nothing else, Ezra will stand there and say, ba, 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 and that'll go on for 20 minutes. You're like, you're wondering, you're sitting there doing something else. You're like, I am getting annoyed. I don't even know what's going on. Oh, it's him. Shut up. Why do you just have to make noise? You're not even making any sense, man. No control. That's the flesh. It'll wear you down. And I love my son. I don't know about you, but sometimes, I get fed up with all of this me stuff. Do you ever look up and you're like, I know what the problem is. I'm tired of me. Me is the problem. You ever, go throughout your day and somebody says, well, what's your problem? I don't know, I'm just annoyed. Are you mad at somebody? No. And then when you get to think about it for a second, no, I am mad at somebody. I'm mad at me. Me's the problem. I've grown so tired of it that I've looked at myself in the mirror and stood there and reamed that guy out and told him what I thought of him literally. You're a jerk. You're pampered. You're a brat. You're selfish. You know what I think, most problems in marriages extend from? Selfishness. You just get looking at, for me, I have to do this from time to time. I have to look at my marriage from the third person point of view. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but just step out of it and look at myself inside of my marriage. Whoa, what a selfish jerk. She needed help with something. You just sat there looking at your phone. You knew she needed help. You knew that there was something that you could do. And just look at it. Look at yourself inside thing. Well, man, you start looking at yourself from the third person point of view, and it's like, well, no wonder she's frustrated with you, you jerk. Like, if you had to live with you, you couldn't stand you either. When I really get down in the dumps and this self-pity begins to rise up, I tell myself, listen, what are you griping about? You've got a place to preach, there's food in the fridge, you've got food in your belly, you've got money in the bank, you're in relatively good health. On top of that, you're saved, your wife is saved, your kids are in church. Now shut up. Yeah. Just shut up. You still got work, everything's taken care of, you're all right. Listen, if nothing else was all right, you've got a home in heaven, you're going to be okay. Just shut up. Well, I don't have this or that. You toddler. Get over it. You've got more than you need. You've got more than most folks. Amen. So, well, I don't have more than so-and-so. Well, who cares about so-and-so? You spend too much time here. I think it'd do you good to, go and get your, you can't really hardly do it anymore without getting a vaccine or something like that, but whatever. If you could, every one of you should go down to El Salvador for a week. Go to some third world country and then come back home. Reset your thinking of what it is that you have. I was watching a video the other day. You watch one thing and then suddenly that's all that wants to give you, fit into the algorithm or whatever. I was watching a video on barndominiums, or shop houses, that type of thing. And all of a sudden I get this one from this guy down in Texas, big, massive place. I mean, he's got an indoor horse corral that holds like 60 horses. And then it connects to his house. His house fits into all of this, and he's got a hangar for his 2 helicopters, and 4-bedroom house on all of that, and stamped concrete here and there, and great big built-in appliances, and everything's all done up and everything. And he's doing this one video talking about his helicopters, and at the end of it, he says, like, subscribe, and all this other YouTuber-y type stuff, and he says, every little bit helps. Like, every little bit helps? What are you talking about, man? That's what poor people say. Every little bit helps. So, man, you need to get out. I guarantee you at that point, you know what he looks at? He looks at somebody's got a bigger ranch than he's got. Oh, man, if only I had another 2,000 acres. If those folks can come on in if they want to come on in. I know some folks standing out there in the foyer. But that's our kind of thinking. You've got 10 times more than what 90% of the people around the planet have got, and you're looking around, every little bit helps. Every little bit helps. I mean, you've got more than what you need. You're all right. Paul said, maybe I've read this, but Paul said this, Romans chapter 8, verse 13. I must be past it. Go ahead and give me my next slide. There it is, Romans 8:13. I kind of skipped some things. It says, for if you live after the flesh, you shall die. But if ye, through the Spirit, do mortify the deeds of the body, you shall live. You can give your flesh everything it wants. Guess what's going to happen to that flesh of yours? It's going to die. Listen, I don't know whether or not the man was saved or not. Steve Jobs, multi-billionaire, founder of Apple and all that kind of stuff. He's dead. He couldn't keep himself alive. With all the billions and billions of dollars, you know what they couldn't do? Couldn't take his cancer away. As far as you and I know, Steve Jobs died without Christ, and guess where he's at right now? What does the Bible say? It says, if a man should gain the whole world, what should it profit a man if he should gain the whole world and lose his own soul? If Steve Jobs was lost and he's burning in hell right now, and I'm not saying that because I think he was some abundantly wicked sinner. I don't say that with a smile on my face. I don't enjoy talking about anybody going to hell. But if Steve Jobs is burning in hell this morning, it's because he rejected Jesus Christ. He didn't have to be any more a sinner than anybody else in here. He could have been I don't know the man personally, could have been by the world standards a good man. Billions of dollars and all that other stuff. But without Christ, he had the means and the opportunity to give his flesh anything it ever wanted. But if you live after the flesh, you shall die. But if ye through the Spirit, you first have to come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ to begin to live through the Spirit. And after that, everything, it's life after that. The problem is counting the flesh and its deeds as dead. That's reckoning yourself dead to sin. All right, let's go ahead and stop right there. We'll come back to that next week if the Lord tarries, the Lord allows us to. Any questions or comments before we close there? Go ahead. Okay. So I don't know how many of you heard that. Brother Donovan, his old